Election Day. I'll be joined today by Rance Collins. He's the editor-in-chief of 800 Democrat to provide you an early vote analysis to look at what's going on in swing states and assess this just surge in early voting that seems to break all records known for the vote. We're going to talk about that and talk about the prospects of the two Democratic candidates, the two presidential candidates, as well as look at these U.S. Senate races, all this and more on the AM Report. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the program. I'm Alex Mahajer, and this morning we've got a lot of headlines to cover. First, with 5 days left until Election Day, nearly 79 million people have already voted in the 2020 U.S. presidential election, according to the U.S. Elections Project. Hundreds of polling locations closures in Iowa due to COVID-19 have impacted 670,000 Iowans, which is 30% of the state's registered voters. These urban areas are reliably Democratic areas. The White House Coronavirus Task Force is warning of a new wave of COVID-19 infections in the western United States. 32 million people are under tropical storm warnings as Tropical Storm Zeta hits the Gulf Coast. SCOTUS has ruled unfavorably for Republicans in two cases, one in North Carolina and one in Pennsylvania, and we will talk about that just a little bit more. But basically, these were Republican attempts to block extensions to ballot receipt deadlines in those states. The Supreme Court has said that they may still rule in on the Pennsylvania case after Election Day. So all in all, it's election fever, and this morning to talk about all of the election-related 2020 news, I've got Rance Collins. He's a dear friend and the editor-in-chief of 800 Democrat. Welcome to the program, Rance.
Oh, it is great to be here, Alex. We have so much to discuss. Let's do this.
Yes, and we've got a lot of people joining this morning. Mark Goldman from LA. Lucia says hello from Santo Domingo. Chantal from Paris, and thanks, Jamie, for a little award. And Adam Cobb, if you like this broadcast and you're watching on the HAPS platform, you can give us a little award, and it lets us know during the broadcasts, and we would greatly appreciate it. So, Rance, thanks for joining. Now, you're the editor-in-chief of 800 Democrat. You've been watching these polls very closely, and yesterday you did do a piece about the national polling that's putting Biden above Trump by I'm gleaning is 12 points nationally, but you're also warning that that's not reflective of what the election outcome could be. Could you explain a little bit why that is?
Well, I mean, every time you report a poll, you have to then add the caveat, a poll is not a result, there is a margin of error, so on and so on and so forth. What I've been trying to tell people this time around is that the national polling this time 4 years ago had about a 3-4 point spread, depending on where you were looking. Right now, the national average is up to about 8 points. It's been as much as 10. This is a very different race than it was 4 years ago. And I think it's okay to feel cautiously optimistic when you see polls out there that say a 12-point, 11-point, or 10-point lead. But it needs to be used as encouragement, because ultimately what didn't bring us through 4 years ago is that we just didn't have all of our base show up. And so, yes, we have 10-point leads in some polls, 11-point leads in some polls, 12-point leads in some polls, but we cannot be complacent, because the only way you make that happen is by getting as many people to vote as possible, which is what's been so encouraging about the early voting recently.
Right. And what's really important to note is that national polling is really moot in a presidential race because it doesn't reflect the electoral map. It doesn't reflect the Electoral College, which is basically an altogether different system. It's a system by which states allocate electoral votes, and that will look altogether different than what the national polling will indicate, because we know that heavily urban areas in populated states tend to go Democrat, but that this race will come down to a few swing states. So, Rance, what are the swing states to watch here? And let's talk a little bit about the three states, particularly that Hillary Clinton lost in 2016. Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. So these are three states in the Electoral College that have typically been Democratic favorites and went for Trump in 2016 by a total of 77,000 votes in the Electoral College, ultimately costing Hillary Clinton the 2016 election. So what are we seeing in those polls, and how are those races doing for the presidential candidates in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan?
Well, right now, Michigan is looking really, really good for the Biden camp. That has been where he's been pulling the best out of the three states. Wisconsin, there was a random, probably outlier poll that had Biden up by 17 points that came out a couple days ago. He's probably not up in Wisconsin by 17 points. There was also a poll that had him up by 5. There was one that had him up by 1. The Pennsylvania polls have about a 6-point average right now, so those look a little bit more solid as well. So all three of the states, there hasn't been a poll in a while where Trump has been leading in those states. Now, it's difficult to compare those with 2016 because both Michigan and Wisconsin were kind of ignored in 2016. And I'm not talking about Hillary Clinton not going to Wisconsin, which is a thing that people like to say all the time. No, everyone assumed that that was part of the blue wall, and nobody paid attention to those two states. And there was hardly any polling. Only one poll came out a week before the election in 2016 that even gave a snapshot as to what was going on in Wisconsin. So people just really kind of forgot those states. So it's really hard to compare polling from 4 years ago to now because there's so many more polls available for Michigan and Wisconsin than there were 4 years ago. But a lot of people are thinking the race is going to come down to Pennsylvania because Pennsylvania is kind of viewed as a state that, Trump really has to win in addition to a Florida and a North Carolina. Without those, he can't do it. And Pennsylvania seems to be his best shot out of those three that he won in 2016. Right now, it's possible. It's not looking great. He's spending lots of time there. But I would say I am, again, cautiously optimistic. And the numbers look good. And more than anything, I'm very encouraged by the campaign schedules of the two campaigns.
Let's talk a little bit. And by the way, we've got some comments rolling in. Mark Goldman says he heard the polls are tightening in Pennsylvania and gave a great interview award. Lucia gave a newsworthy award. If you're watching the Haps app, give us a little award to let us know you're enjoying the broadcast. But with regards to Pennsylvania, let's talk a little bit about the early voting numbers as it pertains to how the state might go. So in Pennsylvania,
difficult to quantitate that, honestly, because as far as I have seen, Trump has not had much success in trying to pivot those riots into something measurable that helps him. He's tried to do this whole law and order situation. I don't know if you guys have noticed, the law and order line has not been used a lot the last couple of weeks by the Trump campaign, which makes me think that it's probably not doing a lot of good work for them, considering that in a lot of the recent polling, when asked specific questions about which candidate you want to lead on certain situations, Biden actually wins law and order, which is kind of hilarious when he's trying to make that the cornerstone of his campaign. So I can't imagine that anything negative happening in any city, particularly in regards to racial unrest and the inappropriate force used by police, does anything to help Trump, even if it does lead to riots, because ultimately that just reflects on him. But I won't give a definitive answer on that, because I know that Pennsylvania is a state with its own heartbeat, and it might, I don't know, it might affect those voters a little bit differently. But I mean, right now, looking at ground game and the things that you were just saying about the early vote in Pennsylvania, things are very organized there. We also got a good Supreme Court ruling yesterday that will allow mail-in ballots to be counted 3 days after the election's over. That means we may not know Pennsylvania on the night of, but we will get every vote or almost every vote counted. So,
Well,
I don't know. I don't think it'll end up being a big factor.
One of the alarming things about this SCOTUS ruling is that the Supreme Court has said that they could still weigh in on Pennsylvania after the election, which was very ominous for a lot of people, as if they were saying, we'll wait to see if the results in the late count will change the outcome, and then we may intervene, which is really problematic. A lot of people are responding to say that whether or not they're counted after Election Day doesn't negate the fact that they were validly cast votes, and therefore you can't flip the outcome if they're just votes. So it's very, very troubling that the conservative members of the Supreme Court have tried to sort of delineate a distinction. Now, so Brant, let's assume now that Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania are all lost by Joe Biden. There are some other paths to victory. There are actually a lot more paths to victory for Joe Biden, and even if he lost those 3 swing states, and one of which is in Texas, which is an unlikely Democratic flip, but has been trending Democrat for years. And what we're seeing, and I know that you're from there and have been watching the polling in Texas, because it looks like very exciting things happening in Texas. Huge voter turnouts. More Black women over the age of 65 have voted so far early than in any election ever in Texas. More than 7 million Texans have voted. These polls, some have Biden ahead. What kind of polling are you seeing in Texas?
Well, the interesting thing in Texas is what you just mentioned. 7 million people have already voted. Within the next day or two, more people will have voted already in the 2020 election than completely voted in the 2016 election in Texas. So we're seeing record numbers, record turnout. We also, Texas saw nearly 2 million new registrations in the last couple of years. A lot of this was thanks to the excitement that came around Beto O'Rourke a couple of years ago when he almost unseated Ted Cruz. And so, yes, Texas is trending toward being a swing state, is trending towards being a state that we will see campaigns actually compete for in the years to come. I don't know if it's actually going to flip this year. I think that Georgia is a far more likely scenario as far as a flip goes. If we're in a landslide situation, if other states if we're on election night and Biden starts to outperform his poll numbers in Florida, North Carolina, and it's looking like he's going to win Georgia, that's when you start looking at Texas as a possibility. Until I see him outperforming his numbers in those states in the East, I'm not going to get my hopes up too much about Texas. But what's good about what's happening in Texas is it's going to be close, and that is going to help down ballot, and that is going to help send more people into state and congressional offices from Texas, which ultimately leads to a more fair and more equal and more fair state than it has been in a really long time. There hasn't been a statewide elected office that's gone to a Democrat since the early 90s, since Ann Richards was governor in the early 90s. So 1976 was the last year that Texas voted for a Democrat. So keep all those things in mind. But Georgia, look at Georgia. That's the tipping point. That's the one where you know it's going landslide.
And the trends in Texas, I'll note, Hillary Clinton lost Texas by 9 points. Beto O'Rourke came within 3 points of beating Ted Cruz in the 2018 Senate race there. And
Obama
with the
lost
1.8
15.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's been trending blue. And with the 1.8 million new voter registrations that have happened on the ground since 2016, that represents about 12% of the Texas electorate from 2016. That's a 12% increase. And if you think about the fact that Hillary Clinton lost by 9 points, you're talking about an expanded electorate, and we can see why Texas is in play. But my point really is if Biden loses Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania and wins Texas, the election will be over on election night because Texas doesn't have absentee voting. They're not really. They've got very prohibitive absentee voting. So we'll know Texas results by election night. And if we were to lose one of those swing states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, or Wisconsin, you did kind of reference this already, but there are other places where Biden is doing very well that we lost in 2016, both conventional swing states and unconventional Democratic territory like Georgia or Arizona, where if we lost one of those three coveted swing states and we flipped Arizona or Georgia, you'll still see an electoral college victory for Joe Biden. What are some of the other crucial states that you're looking at that Democrats are hoping to expand the map with?
Well, first of all, we need to keep our eyes on Nevada. Nevada is the only state Trump has done slightly better in than he did 4 years ago. And of course, we won Nevada 4 years ago, and we won it pretty handily. By a few points. So look at Nevada. Don't count that out as a potential way that Trump could break through the map. But there are other much more in the way of ways that we could. I mentioned North Carolina a second ago. There's also a congressional district in Maine that we did not win last time that I could see us winning this time. There's a congressional district in Nebraska that we could win just like Obama did in 2008, which would be very exciting. You can tell how nervous the Trump campaign is based on where they're going. On Tuesday, perfect snapshot, Biden was the first presidential candidate in years for the Democratic side to go to Georgia. And he spent the day in Georgia campaigning, looking to expand the map. Meanwhile, we had Trump make an appearance in the Omaha area of Nebraska, where he was fighting for that one electoral vote that's decided by congressional district. When you're fighting for one vote, that means that you think your only path might end up being like an electoral college tie, and you're going to need that one vote. That one vote will get you to 270 or whatever the case may be. So the confidence in the two campaigns is very interesting, and that's why it's really exciting to look at this expanded map, because there are lots of places that Joe Biden could potentially pick up some unlikely votes. Georgia and Texas are most obvious. Arizona is becoming a blue state, and it seems very, very likely that not only Joe Biden will win, but we'll send Mark Kelly to the Senate, which will give the state of Arizona two blue Senate representatives. When was the last time that happened? I mean, the things could not look better for us 5 days out. Let's just put it that way.
Well, Renegade Falco is saying polls being used as propaganda. The race is far tighter than what the media presents it as, just like in 2016. I actually agree with that comment. I actually agree with that comment, and I think no one on this broadcast is saying that it's not a tight race. It's definitely tight, and these polls that we're talking about are within a margin of error that is usually plus or minus 3 to 4 to 5%. So when we're talking about these races, no one is suggesting that it is not a close race. These are very, very tight races, and it could go either way. I just wanted to say that. But we're talking about the trending electoral maps. Arizona is trending blue, but all of that depends on voters actually turning out to make it happen. So Christopher Drago says, yes, Arizona's blue. A blood hater says, something complaining about avoiding bias. We're talking about the polls, and partisan politics exists. Everybody, but we just disclose our perspectives.
The thing about polling, I know that everybody it has like fatigue and worries and concerns and stresses from 2016. But here's the thing to keep in mind. We are polling roughly 5 points better nationally than we were 4 years ago. That 5 points nationally, yes, we don't live in a place with a national race, but that gives you a better snapshot of how we're doing than anything else. Because pollsters are not being overly kind to Democrats this time around because they don't want to make the mistakes they made 4 years ago. They are trying to correct the mistakes they made 4 years ago. They're giving wider margins of error and so on and so forth. And so the 5 points nationally that we're seeing would be more than enough to make up for 78,000 votes in 3 states. So don't feel complacent, don't feel overconfident, but you can feel good. We are in a good place. You can be positive and you can tell people, hey, join the winning team.
Sure. Well, I don't know, Vance. I'm not sure if I agree that national polling is reflective of how we're going to do in those 3 states, but it is a reflection that there's broader support for Joe Biden than there was for Hillary Clinton.
And the campaign wouldn't be going to Texas tomorrow. Kamala Harris would not be in Texas tomorrow if they didn't think we were winning the swing states.
Yeah, but Hillary
don't spend time in
states.
Hillary Clinton's
campaign also went to Arizona and Texas in the weeks before the election. So I'll just note that.
Hillary Clinton did not go to Texas. That is incorrect.
She went to Arizona. She went to Arizona before the. She went to Arizona.
But Arizona was close.
Yeah,
that's different.
I'm just saying that the campaign did send surrogates to Texas, and there was an expanded. Hillary Clinton did feel like she was expanding into red states. She was feeling overly confident at this point in 2016.
I think your criticism's incorrect because Hillary Clinton didn't spend time in Georgia or Texas in the week before the election. You don't go to Georgia and Texas in the week before the election unless you're feeling really good and your internal numbers are looking really good on those other states.
All right. So this has been the AM Report with Alex Mahaja for HAPS News. I've been joined this morning by Rance Collins from 800 Democrat. Rance, where can people find you and support what you're doing over there? And you're doing some great work sort of assessing the polls, early polls.
Yes. I mean, even though apparently we disagree on some. I am at 800 Democrat on Facebook and Twitter. Follow us and share our stuff. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rance. This has been the AM Report with Alex Mahaja for HAPS News, the network of Now. We are live every weekday morning at 7:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Eastern with all of your quick political news and headlines to get your day started right. If you like this content, if you like this journalism, and you're watching on the HAPS app, give us a little award using the award button, or you can visit me at haps.tv/@Alex and consider sponsoring this content, buying me a cup of coffee. We'll be back tomorrow morning with political scientist and constitutional scholar Miranda Yavor to discuss what's on the ballot. And next week, Monday, I'll be joined by Los Angeles County District Attorney candidate George Gascon to talk about his work to unseat LA District Attorney Jackie Lacey. So thanks so much for joining, everybody, and we will